Ever feel like you're kind of on autopilot?
Yeah.
Just making decisions that you later regret. Like there's this hidden force in your brain kind of pulling the strings.
Mm,
Well, you're not alone.
yeah,
Today, we are diving deep into the fascinating and often unsettling world of behavioral economics with Daniel Kahneman's thinking fast and slow.
oh yeah,
Get ready for some serious, mind-blowing revelations about how your brain really
for
works.
sure.
And hey, if you're already hooked on this deep dive into the mysteries of the mind,
Yeah,
hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel
definitely.
for a treasure trove of knowledge. We promise your brain will thank you.
So Kahneman's book is really like a user manual for your brain. It's revealing these hidden systems that drive our thoughts and actions.
Exactly. It's like he's cracked the code of human behavior.
Yeah.
One of the most fascinating revelations is this idea that we actually have two distinct systems of thinking constantly, like duking it out inside our heads.
Yeah.
System 1 and System 2.
Think of it like a dynamic duo, but with a lot more internal conflict. System 1 is fast, intuitive, and fueled by emotion.
Yeah.
It's what allows you to instantly recognize a friend's face or dodge a ball hurtling towards you.
It's the system that makes those split-second decisions without us even realizing it.
Precisely. But System 2
Yeah.
is the more deliberate analytical side of our brain.
Okay.
It's the system we engage when solving a complex problem or carefully planning our next move.
So it's the system that requires effort, concentration,
Yes.
and maybe an extra cup of coffee.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Kahneman talks about experiments where researchers could actually observe participants' pupils dilating when they hit their mental limit on a task,
Right.
a clear sign of cognitive strain.
It's fascinating how our physiological responses mirror our mental effort.
It's like our bodies are betraying our mental struggles.
Yeah.
And speaking of mental strain, Kahneman also delves into the concept of ego depletion, which suggests our mental resources are like a muscle that can get tired. But a little sugar rush can actually help replenish those resources and boost mental performance.
That's why that afternoon chocolate bar feels so essential sometimes.
Right.
It's not just about the taste, it's about fueling our brains.
Okay, so we've got these two systems constantly interacting.
Yeah.
But here's another mind-blowing concept from Kahneman's work,
Okay.
priming.
Uh-huh.
This is the idea that our actions and emotions can be influenced by events we're not even consciously aware of.
It's like our subconscious is playing puppet master, pulling at the strings of our behavior.
Exactly. It sounds like science fiction, but the research is undeniable.
Yeah.
Kahneman describes a classic experiment where students primed with words related to old age actually walked slower down a hallway.
Wow.
Just think those words were subtly influencing their behavior without them even realizing it.
It's a powerful demonstration of how susceptible we are to subconscious influences.
It makes you wonder what other hidden forces are shaping our thoughts and actions every day.
Hmm.
And speaking of hidden forces, Kahneman also introduces us to a whole array of cognitive biases.
Right.
Systematic errors in thinking that arise from these mental shortcuts our brains love to take.
These biases are like mental illusions, tricking us into seeing the world in a distorted way.
Okay, so let's unpack some of these cognitive biases.
Okay.
Let's start with the anchoring effect.
Yeah.
It's the idea that a completely irrelevant piece of information can act like an anchor, pulling our judgments in a certain direction.
It's like our brains latch on to the first piece of information they encounter, even if it has nothing to do with the decision at hand.
Exactly. Kahneman describes an experiment where participants were asked to estimate the percentage of African nations in the United Nations.
Okay.
But before they guessed, they spun a wheel of fortune rig to stop at either 10 or 65. Those who saw the wheel stop at 10 guessed, on average, that 25% of UN nations were African.
Okay.
Those who saw 65 guessed 45%.
Wow, so that random spin of the wheel significantly influenced their estimates, even though it had no logical connection to the question.
Right. It's like our brains are desperate for a reference point, even if it's a completely bogus one. And speaking of biases,
Yeah.
here's another one that pops up all the time.
Okay.
The availability bias. This is our tendency to overestimate the likelihood of events that are easily recalled, often because they are vivid, dramatic, or emotionally charged.
Think about how a single news story about a plane crash can make you feel like flying is incredibly dangerous,
Right.
even though statistically it's one of the safest modes of transportation.
Exactly. It's because that vivid image of the plane crash is readily available in our minds, overshadowing all the uneventful flights that never make the news.
And this bias can have a profound impact on our decision-making, from how we invest our money to how we perceive risks in our daily lives.
Well, it's like our brains are playing favorites, giving more weight to the information that's easiest to access, even if it's not the most accurate or representative.
Precisely. And that brings us to another fascinating bias,
Okay.
the representativeness heuristic. This is where we judge the probability of something based on how well it fits a stereotype or mental prototype, often ignoring crucial statistical information.
Okay, I need an example for this one. Heuristics always sound so complicated.
Think about the classic Linda problem. You're told about Linda, a fictional character who is described as outspoken, bright, and passionate about social justice.
Okay.
Then you're asked to judge which is more likely. 1. Linda is a bank teller. Or 2. Linda is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement.
Well, based on her description, she definitely sounds like a feminist. So I'd probably say option 2 is more likely.
And that's precisely the trap most people fall into.
Okay.
They focus on how well Linda represents their image of a feminist and neglect the basic principle of probability.
Okay.
A conjunction of two events, being a bank teller and a feminist, can never be more probable than either event alone just being a bank teller.
I see. We get so caught up in the story and how well something fits our mental model that we forget about the basic logic of probability. And before we move on, if you're enjoying these mind-bending insights, don't forget to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel.
Yes.
You'll unlock a whole universe of knowledge, all designed to help you understand yourself and the world around you better.
Now, building upon that, let's talk about the illusion of validity, which is this persistent belief that we can accurately predict the future, even when we have very little evidence to support our predictions.
So, like when we think we can predict who's going to win an election or which stock is going to skyrocket, even though, let's be honest, we're basically just guessing.
Exactly. Kahneman shares his own experience as a young psychologist in the Israeli army, where he was tasked with assessing the leadership potential of cadets.
Okay.
He felt confident in his judgments, even though, as he later discovered, his predictions were barely more accurate than chance.
Wow. So even experts, people with training and experience, can fall prey to this illusion of validity.
Absolutely. We tend to overestimate our own understanding of the world and underestimate the role of chance and randomness. And this overconfidence can be extremely dangerous.
It's a good reminder to be humble, to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
Speaking of humility, Kahneman also delves into the powerful role emotions play in our decision-making, particularly with loss aversion.
Yeah.
This is the idea that the pain of a loss looms larger than the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
Think about it. Losing $100 feels far worse than gaining $100 feels good.
Right. And this aversion to loss can lead us to make some pretty irrational decisions, like holding on to a losing investment for way too long because we can't bear to sell at a loss.
Or refusing to negotiate a better deal because we're afraid of giving up anything we already have, even if it means missing out on a better opportunity.
It's like our brains are wired to avoid pain more than they're wired to seek pleasure.
Precisely. And this loss aversion, when combined with other cognitive biases, can lead to a fascinating pattern of risk preferences that Kahneman calls the fourfold pattern. It basically shows how our risk preferences flip-flop depending on whether we're facing potential gains or losses.
Okay, break this down for me. What's the fourfold pattern all about?
Imagine you're offered a choice between two gambles. In gamble A, you have a 90% chance to win $1,000.
Okay.
In gamble B, you have a 10% chance to win $10,000.
Okay.
Which would you choose?
Well, a 90% chance of winning $1,000 sounds pretty tempting. I think I'd go with gamble A.
Most people would. We tend to be risk-averse when it comes to potential gains, preferring a sure thing over a gamble with a higher potential payoff, even if the odds are in our favor.
That makes sense. What about losses?
Okay.
How does the fourfold pattern work there?
Now imagine you're offered a choice between two other gambles. In gamble C, you have a 90% chance to lose $1,000. In gamble D, you have a 10% chance to lose $10,000.
Okay.
What would you choose now?
Ooh, that's tough. I definitely don't want to lose $10,000, but a 90% chance of losing $1,000 is pretty scary too. I think I'd gamble with option D, hoping to avoid that big loss.
Exactly. When facing potential losses, we become more risk-seeking. We'd rather gamble on a small chance of avoiding a loss altogether, even if it means risking a potentially larger loss.
So it's like our brains are programmed to double down when we're losing, hoping to get back to even.
Precisely. And this pattern can have major implications for everything from how we invest our money to how we make decisions in legal cases.
It's fascinating how predictable our irrationality can be. But wait, you mentioned legal cases.
Yeah.
How does the fourfold pattern play out in that context?
Let's say you're the plaintiff in a lawsuit with a strong chance of winning.
Okay.
You're offered a settlement that's slightly less than what you expect to get if you win at trial. Would you take the settlement?
Probably. It would feel too risky to turn down a sure thing and gamble on winning even more at trial.
That's the risk aversion of the plaintiff with a strong case. They'd rather secure a win even if it's slightly less than what they hoped for.
Okay.
But now imagine you're the defendant in a weak case. You're facing a high probability of losing a large sum of money. The plaintiff offers a settlement that's almost as bad as the worst case scenario at trial. Would you accept it?
I think I'd be tempted to fight it out in court, even if the odds are stacked against me. There's always that sliver of hope that I could win and avoid the big loss altogether.
And that's the risk-seeking of the defendant with a weak case. They're willing to gamble even if it means risking an even bigger loss just for a chance to avoid any loss at all.
It's incredible how these psychological patterns play out in such high-stakes situations.
Yeah.
And if you're as captivated by these insights as I am, hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into the human psyche. We're just getting started.
Now let's add another layer of complexity to this decision-making puzzle. The power of framing. It's the idea that the way a choice is presented or framed can drastically alter our preferences, even if the options are objectively the same.
So, like how a store might advertise a product as being 90% fat-free instead of 10% fat, even though it's the exact same product?
Exactly. Or think about Kahneman's classic experiment involving a hypothetical disease outbreak. Participants are told that a disease is expected to kill 600 people.
Okay.
They're given a choice between two programs to combat the disease. Program A will save 200 people, for sure. Program B has a 1/3 chance of saving all 600 people and a 2/3 chance of saving no one.
Okay.
Which program would you choose?
That's a tough one. Saving 200 people for sure sounds appealing, but I think I'd be tempted to go with Program B, even though it's riskier. There's at least a chance of saving everyone.
Most people choose Program A in this scenario. They're risk-averse when the choice is framed in terms of lives saved.
Okay, what happens if you frame it differently?
Now, imagine the same scenario, but the programs are described differently. Program C will result in 400 people dying. Program D has a 1/3 chance that no one will die, and a 2/3 chance that 600 people will die.
Correct.
Which program would you choose now?
Oh, wow. That changes things completely. Program C sounds horrific. I think I'd go with Program D this time, even though it's still the same level of risk.
That's the power of framing. When the choice is framed in terms of lives lost, people become risk-seeking, preferring the gamble over the sure loss.
It's amazing how a simple shift in wording can completely flip our preferences.
Yeah, absolutely. It highlights how vulnerable we are to subtle manipulations, even when we think we're making rational choices. And on that note, let's take a break, and we'll be back to dive even deeper into the fascinating world of behavioral economics.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the mind-bending world of thinking fast and slow. We're exploring how our brains, despite their incredible power, are often prone to systematic errors in thinking.
It's like we have this incredible machine in our heads, but it comes with a few quirks and glitches that we need to be aware of.
Exactly. And speaking of quirks,
Right.
we were just discussing how the framing of a choice can dramatically influence our preferences.
Yeah.
It's almost like our brains are easily swayed by the packaging, even if the contents are the same.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not always as rational as we think we are.
Definitely. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of Kahneman's work.
Okay.
His exploration of how our memories shape our judgments about our experiences.
Right.
It's not just about what we experience in the moment,
Yeah.
but how we remember it later.
Our memories are like curated highlight reels, often focusing on the most intense moments and the endings,
Okay.
while neglecting the duration or the sum of all moments.
Right. So a vacation with one amazing day at the beach might leave a stronger positive memory than a trip where every day is consistently pleasant,
Right.
but not extraordinary.
Exactly. Kahneman calls this the peak end rule,
Okay.
and he demonstrated it in a study involving colonoscopies,
What?
of all things.
Okay, this I have to hear. How do colonoscopies fit into the picture?
Patients were asked to rate their pain levels throughout the procedure,
Okay.
and then later to rate the overall unpleasantness of the experience.
Okay.
Surprisingly, those who experienced a longer colonoscopy but with less pain at the end rated the experience as less unpleasant. than those who had a shorter procedure with a more painful ending.
That's so counterintuitive. You'd think a shorter procedure would be preferable regardless of the ending.
That's the power of the peak-end rule.
Yeah.
Our memories are disproportionately influenced by the most intense moment and the final moments,
Yeah.
often neglecting the overall duration.
So it's like our brains prioritize the narrative, the story we tell ourselves about an experience
Right.
over the actual sum of all the moments.
Precisely. And this has profound implications for how we design experiences,
Yeah.
whether it's a product, a service, or even a healthcare interaction.
So instead of just focusing on making things objectively better,
Mm-hmm.
we should also think about how to create those positive peaks and endings
Right.
to make the experience more memorable.
That's one strategy, but it's also about understanding how to mitigate the negative peaks.
Okay.
For example, in healthcare, extending a procedure slightly with a less intense phase at the end
Yeah.
could improve the overall memory of the experience, even if it means slightly more total discomfort.
It's like we're playing mind games with ourselves, but in a way that actually improves our well-being.
Exactly. And this connects back to Kahneman's distinction between two selves: the experiencing self and the remembering self.
Okay.
The experiencing self lives in the present moment, while the remembering self looks back on our experiences and shapes our overall sense of satisfaction.
And you're saying that these two selves don't always agree on what's best.
Right. The remembering self tends to have a stronger voice when it comes to our overall life satisfaction.
Okay.
We often make decisions based on how we think we'll remember them rather than on how we'll actually experience them in the moment.
So we might choose a shorter vacation with a spectacular final day over a longer vacation that's consistently enjoyable,
Right.
but less memorable.
Precisely. We're choosing the memory we want to have, even if it means sacrificing some actual enjoyment in the present.
It's a fascinating paradox.
Yeah.
But knowing this, maybe we can start to be more intentional about crafting both the present experience and the memory we'll cherish later.
Absolutely. And this awareness of our cognitive biases, these mental shortcuts that can lead us astray, is crucial for making more rational decisions.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about how irrational we can be.
Yeah.
But is there any hope for us? Can we actually become less biased, more rational thinkers?
It's not about becoming perfectly rational,
Okay.
but about understanding our limitations and working with them.
So it's like recognizing that our brains are amazing but flawed instruments,
Right.
and we need to learn how to use them effectively.
That's a great way to put it. And one key is to be aware of these biases.
Yeah.
Once you understand how they operate, you can start to look for them in your own thinking and challenge your intuitions.
So it's about slowing down, engaging that system to thinking,
Uh-huh.
and consciously considering alternative perspectives.
Exactly. And it's about creating environments that support rational decision-making.
Okay.
In organizations, this could mean establishing clear decision-making processes and encouraging open debate.
So it's not just about individual effort. It's also about designing systems that promote good decision-making.
Precisely. And it's an ongoing process, not a one-time fix. We're all susceptible to these biases, even when we're aware of them.
It's like we're constantly battling our own brains, trying to outsmart those cognitive shortcuts.
Exactly. And this brings us to another important point: the distinction between experts and algorithms.
Okay, I'm curious. What's the difference and why does it matter?
Kahneman argues that in many domains, simple algorithms can actually outperform human experts
Really?
when it comes to making predictions and decisions.
Oh, really? So you're saying a computer program can be smarter than a seasoned professional?
In some cases, yes.
Wow.
Especially when there's a lot of data available. Algorithms can analyze that data and identify patterns that humans might miss.
So for things like predicting stock prices or diagnosing diseases, algorithms might have an edge.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that algorithms aren't a magic bullet.
Right.
They have their own limitations and biases.
Right, because algorithms are created by humans
Yeah.
who are inherently biased.
Yeah.
So it's like we're transferring our biases into the machines we create.
That's a valid concern, and it highlights the importance of critically evaluating both human and algorithmic decision-making processes.
So it's not about choosing one over the other, but about finding the right balance between human expertise and algorithmic power.
Precisely. And it's about understanding the strengths and weaknesses of both approaches.
It's like we need a new kind of literacy, a fluency in both the language of algorithms and the nuances of human judgment.
I completely agree. We need to be able to critically evaluate information from both sources and make informed decisions in an increasingly complex and data-driven world.
It's a challenge for sure, but it's also an incredibly exciting opportunity. The more we understand about how our minds work both individually and collectively, the better equipped we are to make better choices for ourselves and for the world around us. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been exploring the inner workings of our minds with Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
We've uncovered a whole array of cognitive biases that often lead us astray.
Right.
But the good news is that awareness is the first step towards making more rational decisions.
Exactly. By understanding these biases, we can start to recognize them in our own thinking and challenge those automatic, intuitive responses.
It's like we're becoming more mindful drivers of our own minds, paying attention to the road signs and avoiding those mental potholes.
Okay, so let's recap some of the key takeaways from our deep dive. What are the most important things you hope listeners will remember?
Well, first and foremost, remember that we're all susceptible to these cognitive biases. It's not about being smart or educated. It's about the inherent wiring of our brains.
Right, we all have these mental shortcuts built in. They often serve us well, allowing us to make quick decisions in complex situations.
Yeah.
But sometimes they lead to predictable errors in judgment.
And that's the second key takeaway. These biases operate in systematic and predictable ways. Once we understand those patterns, we can start to anticipate them and adjust our thinking accordingly.
So it's like having a cheat sheet for our own brains, knowing where we're most likely to trip up. But it's not just about individual effort, right? Kahneman also emphasizes the importance of designing environments that support rational decision-making.
Absolutely. We need to think about how to nudge people towards better choices, how to frame options in a way that promotes clear thinking, and how to create systems and structures that encourage thoughtful deliberation.
So it's a combination of individual awareness and smart design working together to overcome these cognitive biases.
Exactly. It's about creating a world where it's easier to make good choices, both for ourselves and for society as a whole.
It's an inspiring vision, and it speaks to the power of behavioral economics to not only understand human behavior, but to actually improve it.
Kahneman's work is a call to action, an invitation to become more aware of our own thinking, to challenge our assumptions, and to strive for greater rationality in our individual lives and in the world around us.
It's a challenge for sure, but it's also incredibly empowering. The more we understand about how our brains work, the better equipped we are to make better choices, navigate the complexities of the world, and create a more rational and fulfilling future.
And if you're ready to dive even deeper into this fascinating world of behavioral economics and discover even more about the hidden forces that shape our thoughts and actions, I highly recommend checking out Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yeah.
It's a book that will change the way you see the world and yourself.
And in the meantime, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more mind-expanding deep dives on our channel. We've got a whole universe of knowledge waiting for you all, designed to help you think better, decide better, and live better. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the amazing world of the human mind.